Welcome to Accessibility Newbie to Ninja. My name is Abby Kingman. I work at Last Call Media. We're a small digital agency located in Western Massachusetts. I'm on Twitter. I didn't put it up here, but I'm A11Y Abby on Twitter. And I'm really sort of pretty new to accessibility, I feel. I've been at it for a little while, and I got going and I studied really hard, and I needed a goal to get certified as a CPACC, which is the Certified Professional in Accessibility Core Competencies, from the IAAP, which is the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And so that was like a big goal, and after I accomplished that, I felt like I sort of need to let go of that thing that actually Debbie talked about in her session about feeling like I'm just a beginner and I'm not really very good at this and I don't really know anything. So once I was certified, I felt like I couldn't kind of hide behind that anymore, and I had to take responsibility for stepping up my game a little bit. So I thought I'd just think a little bit about some of the things that I've done and tried. Maybe some of you are on a similar place in your journey, or maybe you're just getting started. I'm just hoping that maybe I can give a few ideas that might be helpful. It's a little 10-step program, and hopefully one of them at least will be helpful. I'm just curious about you folks. How many people would say that accessibility is a pretty principal part of your position? A couple folks, okay. How many would say that accessibility is a kind of a small part of your position? Most people. Okay. Does anyone feel like accessibility is not a part of your position at all? Yay, nobody. Good, great, because accessibility is important to everyone. Okay, that's cool. So, it worked a minute ago. Okay, that's a problem. Maybe I can do that. Okay, cool. So, accessibility is a big topic, yeah. It's kind of easy to feel pretty puny and overwhelmed by all of it. So today's plan, 10-step program to get going on a path to success, and at the end, there's this super nifty 10-step PDF that I will put up a QR code for that will summarize everything that I went over today. So I picked 10 steps because it's a nice round number. Everyone likes round numbers, and 3 seemed like not enough for a whole presentation. Some of these things that I've tried have worked out better than others. I'm going to say that out front, and I will give more details as we go along. But so maybe some of the things that haven't been a huge success for me might work better where you work, but I figured what the heck. Part of the point is that we just have to keep trying and coming up with ideas and trying to help everyone do a better job at making the web accessible. And let's see if I can, this is getting a little bit. There we go. All right, so point number 1, ask questions. Recapping from Debbie's talk. Since it's a big topic and there is a lot of information, there's just a lot of information to absorb. You really need to dig in sometimes, and sometimes when you start digging in, you can kind of start to feel stuck. And I know I've definitely started to feel stuck at times when I'm trying to interpret the meaning of some semi-abstract WCAG criterion when I try and put it in the context of actually doing an audit. And the good news is that there's a lot of people out there who've been doing this for a really long time and really are true accessibility ninjas. And the other great thing is a lot of these people are really very willing and actually eager to help out. So there are a number of places where you can go to get that kind of help, and these are 3 of my favorites: the WebAIM Forum, the IAAP Connection, and the A11Y Slack channel. And you just need to overcome that stage fright, because these people, you realize that there's people in these channels that are real experts, and you feel like you don't want to ask that silly question. But people really are very eager to help. They're very passionate about it, and they want to really help everyone get better at it. I just wanted to read a quote that a little conversation that came into the IAAP channel last fall, where someone posted a question and said, are there any user groups to discuss doing a manual ADA audit of a website near Omaha, Nebraska? I have a lot to learn, and I don't want to burden my questions on this forum. I'd appreciate it if somebody can point me to a group or learning center. And the first 3 responses were, number 1, this is the purpose of this community. It's for people to ask questions and others to learn as well. Second answer, agreed with the above. Please ask questions here. I might be able to both learn and share. Third answer, I agree with the rest of the folks. This is a great place to ask those questions. So it's a very supportive community, and people really welcome anyone who wants to ask questions.
I don't think the mic is working.
Oh.
Sorry, just trying to get the mic. Can you hear up in the back? Okay, I was told that the mic was not working.
Okay.
Thank you.
This doesn't seem to be working, but yeah, well.
We can hear her, but I don't think the mic is actually transmitting it through the speakers.
I'll see if I can get an EV tech.
Okay, all right, super.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, that's not going to work unless my cursor's over there. There we go. Okay. Next idea, start writing. And it can be surprising how actually trying to put things down in writing will really help to clarify things, and it will expose the things where you're a little bit fuzzy or where maybe there's some gaps in your thinking or gaps in your knowledge. And writing it out and clearing up those fuzzy spots can be really helpful. And it usually helps me remember things a little better, at least for a little while. And if you post the stuff that you write on a social media channel or on a blog, you'll be able to find that clear summary again. So one of the things I'm working on right now is one about color contrast, because I've had a coworker who's asked me, well, what is this contrast thing? It's like, 4.5 to 1 watts. And so I've done some reading up and kind of summarized that, and I'll be posting that as a blog. And so next time somebody needs to ask me that, I can say, I can't quite explain it to you really easily right now, but I've got a great blog post on it. We can look at that. So it also helps you realize that you actually do know some stuff. And there are other people who don't know all that stuff. So while it's easy to think that since I know all this stuff, then everybody must know it, so I don't need to write about this. But it is actually really helpful. I think we all have our own unique voice, and we can put the things that we know in the context of the work that we do and the experiences we have. So I think it's a really great practice to start writing about some of the things that you're working on in the accessibility area. I'm not a great creative writer. Sometimes I get started on a topic and then I have a really hard time finishing it, but I've already promised people that I will make a blog post, so that kind of has to push me through on that one. Okay, idea number 3, make your own audit template. And this is kind of a big one for me. It's a little bit about owning your own process, because there are oodles of checklists and guidelines and templates out there. And I think initially I thought those were really great resources, and it may be a really great place to start. But when I started trying to use that stuff, I found that I liked some parts about one, different parts of another, and it didn't always fit what I was doing. So finally I realized I know the way I work. I know the way my company does work, and I know the kind of sites that we build for our clients. And I actually can say that I don't even have like a master template anymore. I have a few versions, and each time I start doing a really comprehensive audit, I look for one that's kind of similar, and then I branch off of it. But so it's sort of a template, but it's basically a framework that I use, and it's always evolving over time. So yeah, there's some parts of it are how I go through the automated testing. I have another section where I do some more manual verification. I also know that my testing is not going to fully test for every single criterion and every single user agent and find every single flaw. And that's kind of a hard thing to kind of face up to and own up to, and it kind of goes back again to some of the stuff that Debbie was talking about. But really, rather than trying to work through a list of absolutely everything, I know I work through this stuff that I know I can test for. I know what the biggest problems are that people come up with most often on the web, and what people run into for major stumbling blocks. So our clients usually don't have an unlimited budget to fix this stuff either. So it's not a once and done thing. So I can make a pass, identify probably more than a client can fix in a cycle that we have available to them, and there will always be another iteration. So that's been really helpful to have a place that I can come back to, store that information, and sort of iteratively go through it. I've also found that capturing my results in a more consistent format is kind of helpful when it comes to start creating tickets.
Maybe turn off the mic as static coming through. Just turn it off because, yeah.
Okay. Oh, really? Oh, funny. Okay, great, perfect. All right. Next. Sweet. Okay. Shortlist your favorite tools. So there are bazillions of tools out there on the web. As we know, if you started reading into it, started reading about accessibility and looking into ways to do testing, there are a ton of tools out there, and more, I think, every month. And it's kind of related to the last two tips, but don't you just hate it when you know that you found a site that had just the right tool or piece of information you need right now, except that was 5 months ago, and now you don't know where that was. So I've found a couple of different places, different ways over time to just kind of organize my stuff. And I also found that it just didn't work for me to try and put everything in one place. So I have a collection of bookmarks and one for Favlets. I have some Confluence documents where I have more details and links, and I also have a little desktop note-taking app that I can just pull up really quickly. And I use them in different ways. So, and I use them to, organize different things. If someone slacks me, I can just pull something up really quickly. I like to use notational velocity for my desktop stuff, but some people like Google Keep or Evernote. They all have different features. So just try and figure out what works for you, but trying to think of that room with all the stuff thrown all around it, and envision that as all of your toolkit, and just try and get that in order a little bit, and it makes it easier to find that piece of information when you need it. So it took a little while for this reality to sink in for me, but my coworkers actually aren't thinking about accessibility nearly as much as I am. So that shouldn't have been a shocker, but it took a while for me to figure that out. And so I have to remember that since they're not thinking about it all the time, they may need to get reminded, or they may not realize that there's this new standard or a new way to test for something. So I decided that finding out a way to help my coworkers think about accessibility more often would help our whole company to think in a more inclusive way, and to always remember to put accessibility sort of at the beginning of everything we do. And unlike the part about asking questions of the experts, this part should be sort of easy because my coworkers are people that I know, so they're kind of not that scary. But it's also kind of hard because my coworkers say that they think of me as an accessibility expert, and they look up to me, and I tend to not think of myself as that expert. So it's also a little hard because we're distributed and people are always busy, and when I post something that excites me about accessibility in our Slack channel, I'm not sure if anyone's reading that or if anyone's clicking on the links. I have a hard time figuring out what other people are doing to incorporate accessibility into their workflow because we're not really around with each other. So I tried this water cooler thing. I put up a bi-weekly meeting, invited everybody, made it optional, kept it brief. I think I put it down for half an hour. And so for a while that worked out pretty well. And I thought it would be a great idea, a great way to sort of cross-pollinate. I kind of populated a few topics and ideas, some in the sort of the design space, some more in the development space, some more in the project manager space. And what I found over time, though, was that people where I work just don't like going to meetings. So over time, that sort of petered out and people stopped coming. And I get that because we're all busy, and most people probably have too many meetings and not enough time. So that sort of has gone away. But I think I still try to talk about accessibility when I can. So I think if you talk about accessibility early and often with the people you work with, that's a great way to engage and help everyone think about it. Number 6, empower your clients. Similar kind of thing. It took a little while for this reality to sink into me, but most of our clients also don't think about accessibility nearly as much as I do. And that may be true for you folks too. And the thing is, again, we need to help them out. So I try and include accessibility information and accessibility resources now in my documentation. So when we do a site build, in addition to the technical information and the back-end stuff, I sort of have an introductory section where I talk about some ways to help make their site more accessible. I'd say that in my fairly limited personal... Are you able?
Audio visual, can you hit your microphone?
Cool,
Sorry to
yeah.
interrupt.
That's okay.
Maybe-
Should I take that off?
Yeah, it's possible the battery just died.
Ah.
Actually, that should be working just fine.
I think the
Okay,
connection is bad.
Yes, let me borrow that from you. Thank you.
okay, cool. Yeah, I'd say that in my somewhat limited personal experience, I've observed that in a lot of cases, a client's RFPs or specifications indicate that accessibility is an important part of the project, and I've also found that in some of those cases, certainly not all, but sometimes they think that putting it in that spec makes it someone else's job, and that once the project is done, they have accessibility nailed down. So this important thing to convey is that content is so important for accessibility, and a lot of what we do is we put the tools in their hands, but they need to sort of carry it forward and continue to make the site accessible. So I've also noted in my limited experience that the weeks leading up to a big site launch.
Just tighten the connections.
Okay.
Should be all set for you.
Cool. Okay. Better? Yay! Thank you. The final weeks leading up to a site launch may not be the ideal teaching moment for my message about the importance of semantic heading structure. There are a lot of other internal stakeholders and bosses that they have to be answering to, and that site has to go up and the content has to be there, and it's not written yet. So I feel that putting some helpful information in the documentation, it'll still be there after I'm gone. And there's at least a possibility that they will come back to that documentation sometime, or that maybe there will be a new coworker sometime that might refer back to that. So yeah, it's about just empower your clients to also help make their sites more accessible. Number 7, get certified and then keep learning. So in this little cartoon, our artist Molly has pretty much captured exactly the way I felt when I passed the CPA-CC exam. It was pretty exciting. So, but the time that I spent studying for that certification was a great way to learn a lot more. I discovered a lot of new learning resources. So I think kind of making a commitment to yourself that you're going to knuckle down and get ready for an exam is a great way to just focus on learning some new things. There's the CPA-CC, which I mentioned earlier, that's sort of a foundational certification. It represents sort of a broad cross-disciplinary knowledge about disabilities, universal design, accessibility-related laws and standards, whereas the WAS is a more intermediate level and is more on the detailed technical level. So maybe take a look at their programs and see if one of those looks interesting to you for getting a certification. And then take the time to study. They have a great body of knowledge to study from for both of those. I'm also a huge fan of the DeQ University classes. There's also Udacity, which has sort of a more developer focus. So yeah, I think the best thing about studying for the CPA-CC credential was it wasn't the letters after my name, and it wasn't the admiration of my peers, and it wasn't the cool certificate that came in the mail. I think that that's one of the most important things that really changed the way I think. And it's really changed the way I think about accessibility and the way people interact with the web. So it's sort of like a whole paradigm shift for me. So finding time to do all this additional learning is something that tends to come in waves, because doing this is not my all-day, everyday thing. We all kind of wear a lot of hats where I work, so that's not ideal, but if you can find time to carve out some time for learning on an occasional basis, that's super helpful. Okay. Follow some people on social media. So this is one where I'm sort of spotty at. I run hot and cold with it. I'm not a huge fan of social media in general. I feel like lately the more I read about all of the tracking and data collection and hacks that go on, I kind of sour on it. But it's also, in social media, there's a lot on the positive side too for making connections and establishing community across geographical boundaries. And there are just so many smart people out there who are sharing great information on social media. So you can find out about events, you can, get in on some great discussions. And there's definitely a risk of distraction, and I've definitely had mornings where I've just gone to do my social media check-in and gone down a rabbit hole. But I have to say that it's been, on the whole, a really positive thing for my learning, because we're a small company and I don't have a lot of people that I can interact with in person in the office. So I put up a couple of links up here. The first two are also linked on the PDF that I'll provide later. And these are sites that have lists of people to follow on social media if you want to learn more and get stronger in the area of accessibility. The last one actually is not on the PDF because it came out after we did that, but in recognition of International Women's Day, Carrie Fisher posted a tool that will analyze the list of people that you're following on Twitter and try and estimate the percentages of men, women, and non-binary people that you're following. It can only do it based on the information that's in the profile. But she also posted her own list of women to follow too. So if you are looking at your list and you think you need to expand that, Carrie's list might be a good place to start. Number 9, go to an accessibility conference. You might learn more in 2 days than you might otherwise learn in months of following people on Twitter and taking online classes and going to conferences that are not as focused. You will probably get to meet a bunch of those really smart people that you're following on Twitter. You'll have a chance to meet the people who are answering the questions in the Slack channel. I had never been to a big conference before last fall. I'm just not really generally terribly excited about going to conferences, but last fall I went to A11Y Toronto, and it was an amazing experience, and I had a great time. It was a really fun community. So if you are looking for a chance to use your professional development opportunities, I would highly recommend trying to slip in an accessibility conference. And then finally, I think the last and sort of a really important thing is to work on just having fun with it, because as I like to say, it's a long and winding road, so pack a lunch. There's a lot to learn. And accessibility is hard in a lot of ways, and in some ways it's really easy. I mean, you think about it, we need to put alt text on images. What's easier than that? But on the other hand, it's easy and it's hard. It's hard to do it well, and there's just a lot of sort of context involved in a lot of what we do. So I think the thing that's really changed for me is that I've stopped thinking about accessibility as a technical topic. And if it really was sort of a technical topic, I think it would be a lot easier if it was just about coming up with solutions in code. There's a lot of smart people who can do that. So I never really worry about whether our developers can figure out how to code something. The thing that is hard about accessibility, in a sense, is, and what makes it so great, is it's really more of a people topic. So in order to build a web that's going to be truly accessible, people really need to change the way that we think about building the web. So, and changing the way that you think is not easy to do, even if you really want to do it. And people aren't necessarily on board. People tend to like the way they work and like the way they come up with ideas. So trying to convince people that they should change their ideation process can be a little bit tricky at times. But I think if you have full vision, and you've had full vision for your whole life, most likely you're pretty strongly driven by visual input. If you have full motor function and reputedly normal cognitive function, those are things that drive the way you experience the world, and they drive your thinking, and they drive your creative processes. That's a really hard thing to change. It's really fundamental. So I think It can start to feel easy to feel deflated about being an accessibility specialist, but it's so important to keep it fresh and keep it interesting and keep it exciting. So someone asked me last time, what is it that I do to try and keep it fun? And when I thought about it, actually, I think every time that I learn something that is exciting enough that I want to post it on our internal accessibility channel on Slack, that's really fun for me. And one day, a few weeks ago, someone posted a question and they had a problem that a client needed to solve. They needed to solve for a support case. And I was able to find a solution for that and post a pattern that they were able to use. And they were so happy about that. And I was walking on the clouds for 2 days after that. So things like that make it really fun for me. So I'm kind of nerdy. And if I get to spend a chunk of time just really digging in on the site and filling out my spreadsheet and like organizing the information, that's actually really fun for me too. So think about ways to keep it fun and have a good time. So, obviously there's way more than 10 ideas on how you can step up your game. Just, off the top of my head, I was able to think of doing more screen reader testing because for me that's kind of a bugaboo. It's not a real strong area for me, so if I spent more time practicing that would be a great way to up my game. If I learned how to use another screen reader, that would be even better, or learn more about voice activation. So anyway, I was just curious if anyone else in the room had anything that came into their mind, or some of the favorite things you might have done. Does anyone have any ideas for adding number 11 or number 12 to my list of knowledge nuggets for aspiring ninjas? So maybe you can take this home and think about it a little more, and think about what you might add to the list if you were trying to share this with your coworkers. And so I guess in closing, I just wanted to say that, like me, you may not feel like you're a ninja yet, but that's okay. Just do the best you can and be awesome. And here is a link that you can use to download the PDF. And I'm finished way early, so we have lots of time for discussion, ideas, questions, or spare found time. Yeah, question in the back.
Can you give like a specific case studies on something, maybe a project you worked on that you helped them improve their accessibility?
That I helped them improve, that I helped a client improve their accessibility. I think that actually is something that works better for clients who are already sort of geared up in that direction. Sometimes we try and bake in accessibility even if people aren't asking for it. Let me put it that way. So even if somebody doesn't realize that they need an accessible site, we're going to do our best to deliver that for them, and I put the documentation together for them to use the tools they've presented. The clients that are already kind of oriented that way often know a lot, and those are fun because we sort of get to exchange. They have their tools, I have mine, they give me resources, I give them some, so that's kind of a fun exchange. So I'd say that's probably the best kind of case study I have. I think when people come in and who already have an interest in accessibility, that we're both almost sort of able to help each other out. I think the cases that are sort of unknown are the ones where I think the client isn't really sure that they want accessibility. Maybe they're skeptical. They're thinking that accessibility is going to cost them more or something. So I think I'm just sort of planting little Easter eggs out there, and that they will someday realize that there is this skip link on this page, and what is that? So, that's kind of a hard one to say where I've actually felt that I've definitely helped a client. Yeah.
So let's say you're at the baking unit stage.
Mm-hmm.
What are you telling clients to look for? And what are the surprising things that they wouldn't expect?
I don't think I necessarily, well, the things that I mostly tell them to look for is just to give them the information about the alt text and naming. I'll give them documentation on how to put names on their video frame so that when a screen reader lands on it, it says what the frame is for. I don't necessarily try and sell it a lot. We just try and build components that, I'll do the testing. I'll make sure that it will have appropriate tab navigation. So they may come in with the site that they want us to rebuild in Drupal that will have a lot of accessibility errors. And sometimes we'll do like sort of a quick accessibility audit of that site. And I tend to not document that a lot because I see a lot of things that I know that we're just not going to build that way. So the way that other site might have been built just isn't the way that we're going to build it.
Let's take it from the perspective of, I'm the newbie.
Mm-hmm.
And, and in the process of designing a new site, I am the customer.
Yeah.
And I know nothing about accessibility, and I want to know some of the things that I'm going to be hearing about or that I should be cognizant of as I'm working with my vendor to know what I have to employ.
Yeah.
What's important, what are the key things.
Sure. So yeah, that would just be like making sure that just open each page and tab navigate it. And if you should find when we're done that you would be able to navigate through all of the interactive elements on the page with a keyboard. And it's surprising how often you'll go to a site and you just can't even do that. So that's a great one to start with. Looking for images without alt text, or the alt, that when you land on it, it just reads you the file name. So, things like that are really super important. Putting good tags around image fields. I really like it when we can put a tag around an image length so that it will only announce things once. So that's kind of the extras that I try and put in so that the announcements are informative and concise and not duplicative. So yeah, things like that are the aspirations. In the back there?
I apologize if I missed it when I stepped out, but I was wondering what you may know about what tools could be used either in browser or test frameworks or anything like that that can help a person, like in Firefox I've used apps by DQ, just to give an accessibility sort of overview of the page.
Yeah, like you said, there are tons of tools, and I think I gave a talk here last year that just sort of focused on tips and tools. But I think at this point there's so many out there. I use Axe a lot. I use Wave, an old standard. I use that a ton. I use Functional Accessibility Evaluator. I have a whole list of color contrast tools that I find work depending on the situation that I'm in. Sometimes you have the freedom to create a new palette. Sometimes you're limited by a brand guideline. I think there are just a lot. I have bookmarks and favlets that I use for doing text spacing and reflow testing, but I wasn't really trying to kind of give a compendium of resources at this point, just kind of some work practices. Yeah. Was there another question over here?
That's the same question.
I see. Yeah. I gave this once before, and someone said, "Would you share your template?" And and it's like that's kind of not the point. It's like I could share my template with you, but it probably wouldn't be any use to you. I think it really is about coming up with your template based on the tools you use and the workflow that you have, and so that will help you streamline and strengthen your own workflow.
As far as sharing, one thing that you had that might be more worth sharing is the documentation that you provide for content guidance to your clients.
Yeah, my coworkers have asked me to put together a white paper, and I've sort of joked that it's going to be a life work. It's turning into an encyclopedia of everything that I know about. And it's going to be another 10 years before I finish it. Yeah, I feel like a lot of sites have done a really good job of that. And again, that comes back to feeling like I'm not enough of an expert to do this because other people have done it so well. But I feel like we can each kind of do our own. The documentation that I provide for clients is really pretty basic, and it talks about alt text and file naming and things like making sure that they understand video captioning. It really varies a lot depending on what kind of site we're building. So while there's some really basic stuff that's always the same, I tend to kind of tweak it depending on what we're building. And yeah, I've tried to standardize my documentation process, but I find that sites tend to be so customized that I end up rewriting most of it for each site. Yeah. Well, thank you all for sticking it out to the end, and I've got a little bit of extra found time before the next session. Thank you all.